Mission Impossible 6 Fallout, which is a Tom Cruise vehicle. So of course most of the jokes I will be saying will be based around his Scientology and short stature. I probably won't touch much on his supposedly closeted homosexuality, because I have no direct confirmation of this. God knows I've tried, the amount of nude emails I've sent him. Now, I have a feeling that it's entitled Fallout. I'm not sure, but I think it might be an oblique reference to the amount of hair plugs that most of the cast seem to be rocking. Now, as in all Tom Cruise vehicles, movies, Tom drives motorbikes and breaks furniture around various European tourist destinations in order to entertain Americans who can't be bothered to apply for a passport. And it would seem to me anyway that Mission Impossible refers to the likelihood of there being anything of remotely artistic value happening in the latest edition of this tired franchise. And while we're at it, I wouldn't worry about any spoilers. I personally could not make hide nor hair of the plot whatsoever. I've read video player instruction manuals that were easier to decipher, but here goes. This film was released in 2018, and it was directed by Christopher McQuarrie, who was a frequent collaborator with Tom on various other things. Sorry, here we go. Just reading my script here. Frequent collaborator with Tom on Valkyrie, a movie about Hitler. He's also a collaborator with accused sex offender Bryan Singer and Kevin Spacey. So this film has ties to Scientology, Nazism, and paedophilia. All the ingredients of a pretty standard Hollywood cocktail party, I think we'd admit. Now, my thing is not working well. Here we go. Yes. The plot concerns a terrorist group called the Apostles, which is a bit problematic because thinking the Apostles are a terrorist group seems pretty much of a throwback to the Roman Empire. I don't know, perhaps one of the producers was Caligula, or to use his proper name, Harvey Weinstein, but in a case of art imitating life, the Apostles are responsible for a massive smallpox outbreak in India. Whereas I heard Tom was responsible for a massive herpes outbreak in Beverly Hills at some point in his career. Although the terrorists are militant atheists, they use Christian iconography. And this is in no way to discredit these belief systems and to encourage people to seek spiritual succor from perhaps a newer religion. Perhaps one originated by, L. Ron Hubbard. Of course it isn't. Most of the terrorists are Eastern European, which nowadays is sort of the go-to ethnicity of movie terrorists, if you want to avoid your cinemas being picketed. The terrorists are trying to get some plutonium, which I think comes from Pluto, unlike uranium, which comes from Uranus. Sorry about that. One of the first scenes... There's a kind of tribute to the American police force when Tom shoots Ving Rhames, an unarmed black man. They then manage to capture a militant atheist terrorist from that hotbed of extremism, Norway. They then interrogate him in a hospital bed where he watches reports by Wolf Blitzer on CNN showing imagery of the capitals of 3 world religions, the Vatican, Jerusalem, and Mecca, have been nuked. I don't know, maybe this is a bit of Scientological wish projection. But anyway, even though it is CNN, believe it or not, this turns out to be fake news. Who could have seen that one coming? I couldn't help noticing that Wolf Blitzer is a terribly awful wooden actor, which is kind of surprising for someone who worked at CNN in the lead up to the Iraq War. You'd think he'd be quite good at reading scripted fiction, but obviously not. This guy's quite an exhilarating cast apart from Wolf. You've got Shaun of the Dead, Marcellus Wallace, and Tina Turner, aka Angela Bassett. who, even though she was born in 1958, which makes her close to 60 years old, she looks absolutely radiant, ravishingly beautiful. I was thinking perhaps, a bit like Oscar Wilde's Dorian Gray, maybe she has a portrait of Madonna in her attic, as they were born in the same birth year. Also, the cast includes Henry Cavill as Tom's co-protagonist, agent, who, in one of the opening scenes, skydives with him out of a plane. Though I'm not really sure why Superman needs a parachute. They jump into the Grand Palais in Paris, one of the tourist destinations, and immediately go into a nightclub, looking like two old guys in a nightclub. The plot moves swiftly along. Tom follows an Asian man into a public lavatory, which is coincidentally how Tom met his first agent. He then, after this, meets a character called the White Widow, who is a horrible, scheming female arms dealer. And no, it's not Hillary Clinton. But, very similarly to Hillary Clinton, the widow also keeps a weapon hidden in her garter belt. That's right, her penis. In the highly believable plot twist, Ethan pretends to be the Asian chap that I didn't mention before, that he actually was killed in the toilet. And of course, when he goes to meet the terrorists, as he's supposed to, for some reason they never really met this chap and decide to believe that he is an Asian man, because as we all know, international terrorists have absolutely no stringency whatsoever regarding the identity of who they interact with. They've got less concern than, I don't know, a doorman IDing 17-year-olds outside of Weatherspoon's pub in Hull. This is all scripted, as you can tell. He has to kidnap head terrorist of the organization to exchange for the plutonium. He then, to do this, he plants a bomb. This very tiny device that creates massive amounts of discomfort. Very much like Tom himself. I thought the person playing the actor, the head terrorist, I seem to have recognised him from, the unemployment benefit office where I used to sign on. Then again, if you ever see an actor sneaking into a dole office, it's a pretty common thing, about as common as seeing an Eastern European sex worker sneaking out of the Oval Office. Very, very common occurrence. Then, Henry Cavill, Superman chap, he has a lot of animosity with Tom/Ethan Hunt, which is rhyming slang, as we all know, because Henry Cavill is 6'4". And supposedly, Tom wanted other actors, but all the actors of the same size as Tom weren't available because they were all working on the third installment of The Hobbit. Get back to the plot. They push this terrorist unemployed chap into the Seine, which is a big river that runs through Paris. So you get to, as an American without a passport, go on a little boat ride on the Seine. They stick him in there, they fish him out, and they put him in a gimp mask. And I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that it was it's the same gimp mask where Tom discovered his second agent behind. Then something happens, there's some double crossing. Superman turns out to be a super pain in the ass. And there's a lot of shooting in a cellar that happens. It's really confusing. I mean, the only upside of the whole thing is that Alex Baldwin gets stabbed. That was a highlight for me. And then, for some reason, they escape the cellar, go above ground, run for about 30 seconds into St. Paul's Cathedral, because as we all know, gritty cellars with dripping mildew are very, very prevalent around that incredibly high rent area of London. He runs into St. Paul's, getting pursued by the bad guys. There's a sermon in progression. I'm not really sure how they got to film there in St. Paul's at this particular time. I don't know how they contacted the Archbishop of Canterbury, perhaps through Grindr or something, I'm not sure. Anyway, he's pursuing Superman through St. Paul's, and then they go over, he runs across the bridge to get to the Tate Modern, where the terrorists escape by helicopter, because of course, like all international terrorists, they try to keep a low profile by flying a helicopter between two of the most famous landmarks in Europe. That's just what happens. Next thing you know, for some reason, I'm not really sure, I didn't really pay attention, I think I may have nodded off during this part, they have to go to Kashmir to let the sun beat down upon their face. They end up in Kashmir, and they end up in this camp. Oh, it's an NGO, a charity camp. And in another highly believable coincidence, Ethan's ex-wife is there. And they actually seem really, really happy to see each other. I think that because this is actually the only ex-wife that he hasn't tried to induct into Scientology. In fact, he seems so happy to see her that he's looking around for a couch to jump up and down on, but he can't find one. Then, as of course you might imagine, suddenly he has to partake in a thrilling helicopter race to stop the water supply of India and China being contaminated, which could lead to the deaths of hundreds of millions of people of colour. So just as well it's not a Mel Gibson movie, or he probably wouldn't even bother at that point. Probably just go on another drunken binge. Well, Tom's pursuing the helicopter. He's running behind it, flying behind it. He crashes into the helicopter, and both helicopters crash into the top of a very, very high mountain cliff, and the helicopters roll over and over again. But luckily, Tom is completely unscathed because he was wearing a seatbelt, and this movie is a load of unbelievable shit. Then, basically, I'm going to spoil this to say it's a massive shock to say this, but Ethan saves the day. Everything's okay. Hundreds of millions of people don't have their water contaminated any more than it already is. Angela Bassett says, "What's love got to do with it?" to Tom. And they end with an embarrassingly bad joke, just as I will. There are two stockbrokers on their way home from work. One says to the other, "When I get home, I'm going to rip my wife's knickers off." The other one asks, "Why is that?" The first one says, "Because the elastic is hurting my legs." Now, that was 13 minutes of a 2.5 hour movie that I encapsulated down to 13 minutes of quick-fire gags from the best. All sent in the mail they were, every single last one of them. And I sifted through, there were hundreds and hundreds of submissions to come up with those gems of comedic brilliance. Now, I'm going to try to make this 20 minutes long, but then again not, because I'm in a transitional phase at the moment, not as in bodily, but as in what I'm going to do with these podcasts. So I've already waffled on for an extra minute, 46 seconds here. I'm just going to end it there.